Millions of people are expected to turn on the TV to watch the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh, who has asked for a no-fuss service. The funeral has been restricted by coronavirus rules, but will reflect his long life of military and public service. For more on this, Professor of Cultural Studies at Monash University, Toby Miller, joins me live now. Professor, can you give an overall sense of how the funeral is reflecting Prince Philip's wishes?
Well, on the one hand, it's clear that there is an important family component, and that's natural. On the other, there is this notion of the mythology of service that is clearly central to the notion of the royal family, both in Britain and abroad. And then thirdly, there is this military element that has already been mentioned in your coverage, which is part of, again, the mythology of Britain as a major naval power, as an imperial power. So I think those aspects are all quite important, along with the notion of not making a fuss, the suppression of feeling, the suppression of emotion. That is a byword in the royal family, and of course has become very controversial over the last quarter of a century because of what happened with Princess Diana and what is going on with Meghan Markle. So all those aspects, I think, are quite crucial components. Your footage now of serving military is an indication of just how important that is to the symbolism of the monarchy and the notion of his biography.
And when we do touch on the military topic, there, of course, the absence of military uniforms, as well as who's on that minimised guest list, were significant talking points in the lead up to the service today. But really, how significant are those in the scheme of things?
Well, in terms of the traditions of the royal family wanting to present itself as directly connected to the military, I think it's quite important. The issue here, of course, is that Harry, as part of his departure from formal royal duties, no longer has the right to wear military uniform, even though he was a serving officer in the past. And the second issue is that Andrew, very controversial figure because of his connections to a disgraced criminal, sexual criminal, would recently, on his 60th birthday, have been elevated to being made an admiral in the Royal Navy simply by right of his birth. But that hasn't happened as a consequence of the scandal and his terrible interview with the BBC about it. So as a consequence of that, the unusual thing is to see these men who normally wear the physical pomp and circumstance that you're seeing with these serving men and women will simply be in mourning attire, which in some ways I think is an appropriate change, but is also a sign of the crisis that the monarchy is experiencing.
Of course. Now, on a slightly different note, as we've said before, millions of people to tune in to watch this funeral service, but some aspects of the media coverage are going to be scaled down, particularly the BBC, and that's following backlash over their coverage last weekend.
That's right. So over 110,000 people wrote in online to complain about the fact that the BBC had basically removed all its original programming to cover the death of the Prince. I doubt Sky News Australia has ever received 110,000 complaints about a program. And in addition, public opinion polling shows that there is similar concern amongst the British public, not only about the BBC cancelling its programming, but about the amount of press coverage that's been dedicated to this. It's interesting that on the day that he sadly passed away, Channel 4, the quasi-public, quasi-private TV network, was the only one of the major outlets on television that didn't drop programming. It suspended it briefly and its ratings went right up. So yes, there is a sense that this is the passing not only of an important figure in British public life, but potentially a shift in the significance of the monarchy for many parts of the population. You know, the majority of British people still support a monarchy, but very small amounts of the British public want Charles to become the next king. And a lot of the support for the monarchy circulates around the very figure of Elizabeth, the Queen herself, not around other people connected with her.
And just briefly, Professor, we're seeing live pictures of the lead up to the service at Windsor Castle now. Of course, not taking away from anything that we're going to see over the next couple of hours, but what happens after that? Do we then see this mourning period lifted? Do the royal family members start to resume their duties? What happens next?
Yes, that's precisely what will occur after a little more period of mourning. The family will get back to work in keeping with this notion of duty of service that is at the core of their mission and was at the core of Prince Philip's life. Of course, in terms of their internal lives, we can only speculate, but it's fairly clear from the quite moving contributions made by his children over the last really 4 or 5 weeks, but especially the last week, that there will be a deep sense of loss felt by them and by his widow, Queen Elizabeth.
There certainly will. Professor Toby Miller from Monash University, thank you so much for your time.